Beyond the woods, no one in the quiet town of Dellingham ever dared cross the western tree line. The forest beyond was a place of whispers and old warnings. The locals called it Grave Root Hollow. Dense, dark, and endless. People who went in didn't come back, or if they did, they weren't the same. Teenagers, of course, are born skeptics. On a crisp October evening, 5 friends gathered near the edge of the forbidden woods. Amber, the skeptical leader; Jake, the practical one; Lauren, the horror enthusiast; Mark, her sarcastic boyfriend; and Danny, Amber's little sister, who only came along to prove herself. Lauren held up her phone. Urban legends are always based on something, and tonight we find out what. Mark scoffed. Or we wander around, get cold, and leave disappointed. Only if you wimp out first, Amber challenged, already stepping into the underbrush. The forest swallowed them. 8. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. No birdsong, no breeze. Just the crunch of dead leaves under their boots, and the rustle of branches that seemed to twist closer together with every step. After an hour of walking, the path behind them was gone. Jake noticed it first. "We should have hit the clearing by now," he said, frowning. "We're walking in circles." "No," Danny whispered, staring up at the trees. "They're moving." Everyone laughed it off, except Amber. She had noticed it too. The moss grew thicker in places they had already passed. Tree trunks bore markings they didn't remember, and the shadows, they weren't natural. Suddenly, Lauren froze. "Guys, look." Ahead, half hidden by fog, was a cabin. Old and leaning, like it had one foot in the grave. Shingles hung loose like peeling scabs. The door creaked open as if it had been waiting. "Not on the map," Jake muttered. Amber pushed forward. "Let's check it out. Maybe someone's there, or it's a hay." "No one hunts here," Lauren said. "Not anymore." They entered. The air was heavy, stale. Dust floated like ash. Animal bones and strange symbols lined the shelves. An altar sat in the center, built of branches, stone, and what looked like teeth. Mark lifted a leather-bound book from the floor, thick with mold. "Guys!" The pages were filled with drawings, deformed figures, black-eyed children, trees growing through screaming mouths. "Witches," Lauren whispered, "or worse." Suddenly, the door slammed shut. The wind howled outside. Candles lit on their own, casting flickering shadows along the cabin walls. Then they heard it. Laughter. Distant. Childlike. Wrong. "I'm done," Jake said, grabbing the door. Locked. Amber rushed to a window, boarded from the outside. Then a voice echoed, low and breathy, not quite human. "You came too far." Danny screamed. The altar caught fire. But it wasn't like any fire they knew. Green and cold, and it didn't burn the wood. It only made the shadows grow. One by one, they began to move. Shapes crawled from the corners. Thin, tall, jointed wrong. Skin stretched over bone. Hollow eyes. Jake grabbed a chair and smashed the window. "Go!" They fled into the night, running blindly through the trees. Behind them, the creatures didn't run. They glided, silent, persistent. Lauren tripped and screamed as something grabbed her ankle, pulling her toward the earth, which split like a mouth. Mark and Jake yanked her free. They didn't look back. When they stopped running, they were alone. "Where's Danny?" Amber gasped, scanning the dark. She was behind me, Lauren said, panicked. Amber spun in circles, calling for her sister. Only the woods replied, rustling, whispering her name. Suddenly, a faint voice answered, Amber. It was Danny's voice. They turned and saw her standing twin. Her eyes glowed faintly. I don't think that's her, Mark whispered. Amber stepped forward anyway. Danny? The girl smiled. But it wasn't Danny's smile. She's not lost, you are, she said. And then she vanished, like smoke caught in wind. They ran again. Time unraveled in the forest. The sky remained dark, the moon frozen. Hours passed, maybe days. They couldn't tell. Hunger gnawed, sanity frayed. Jake began muttering to himself. Mark snapped, screaming at the trees. What do you want? The forest answered, to remember. They found another structure, this one a stone well in a grove of dead trees. Hanging above it was a rope made of braided hair. Amber leaned over the well's edge and saw her own face staring up, eyes gouged out, mouth sewn shut. The others pulled her away just in time. Suddenly, Danny appeared again, or whatever wore her face. You don't belong here, she whispered. But now you do. The ground beneath them cracked open. Darkness. Amber's scream echoed into nothing as she tumbled through the void. Her body finally hit something solid, soft, wet earth. Groaning, she sat up. She wasn't in the forest anymore. The ground around her was black, pulsating like a living thing. Giant roots twisted in the air like serpents. The sky above was blood red, with no stars, only a gaping hole where the moon should have been. Jake landed beside her, coughing, dazed. Where are we? He gasped. Amber stood, scanning the hellish terrain. Not home. Mark and Lauren dropped in next. Mark had a gash across his arm, bleeding steadily. Lauren looked pale and barely conscious. They were underground or under something. The trees above weren't trees anymore. Their trunks were bones. Their branches stretched like claws. And there were sounds, scraping, clicking, whispers, all around them. Amber forced herself to focus. We need to find Danny. You saw what I saw, Mark said, panting. That thing wasn't. Amber turned to him. Then where is she? Suddenly a sound like cracking wood rang out. From the shadows ahead, something huge moved. It had the outline of a deer, antlers like twisted black iron, but its body shifted with insect-like limbs and wet, gaping mouths across its torso. It sniffed the air and turned its hollow eyes toward them. Run, Jake whispered. They ran, but this time the forest moved with them. The trees bent and shifted, guiding them toward something. Ahead, the earth opened to a stone archway covered in ancient runes, glowing faintly with green light. The creature stopped at the edge, unwilling to follow. They crossed the threshold. Inside was silence. The chamber beyond the archway was enormous. At its center was a massive stone slab, and on it lay Danny, eyes open, lips moving silently. Amber rushed to her. Danny, I'm here! But as she touched her sister's hand, her mind split open. Visions flooded in. Hundreds of years ago, a group of women, healers, seers, outcasts, had fled persecution into these woods. They formed a coven, binding their spirits to the forest to escape death. But their ritual twisted. Instead of immortality, they were fused to the land, forever watching, whispering, waiting. Danny had wandered too far and become a vessel. Amber fell backward, screaming. "She's a gate," Lauren whispered. "They're trying to come back, through her." From the shadows, a voice answered. "She opened the way. You followed. Now none of you leave." The shadows congealed into human-like figures, women with hollow eyes, mouths sewn shut, their skin etched in blackened runes. Witches, forest-bound, ageless. One stepped forward and reached for Amber. But Mark, still holding the strange book he'd taken from the cabin, flipped it open. "These symbols," he muttered, "they're not just drawings, they're seals." Lauren joined him. "If we can finish the ritual, maybe we can see." Jake grabbed a rusted knife from an altar nearby. "Then we don't leave until it's done." The witches screamed as the first rune was spoken aloud. Danny thrashed on the altar. The ground shook. Amber held her sister, whispering through tears. "You stay with me. You stay, Danny." One by one, they read the runes, spilling drops of blood onto the stone floor with each verse. The forest wailed. Roots burst from the ground, trying to strangle them, pull them back into the soil. Mark was grabbed, dragged screaming into the dark. His last words, "Don't stop." Lauren fell next, torn apart by shadow forms. But her final breath spoke the last word of the ritual. The altar split. Light erupted from Danny's chest, burning, holy, deafening. The witches screamed in agony, their forms unraveling, pulled back into the soil, as if vacuumed by the earth itself. The forest groaned like a dying beast, and then silence. Jake and Amber lay beside Danny, breathing hard. The red sky had cracked open to black, and stars bled through. And then they woke up, in the middle of a sunny field. Danny lay beside them, unconscious but breathing. No sign of Mark, no sign of Lauren. The book was gone. Behind them, the forest stood tall and quiet. Dellingham was visible in the distance. They walked home. 6 months later. Danny hadn't spoken since that night. Amber stayed by her side every day, watching her sketch strange symbols in notebooks. Jake never went near the woods again. He moved away. They buried Lauren and Mark's belongings, but their bodies were never found. And deep in the basement of the town's church, a hidden camera recorded something one winter evening. The roots beneath the building pulsed, and the whisper came again. "You opened the way." 6 months after their escape from Graveroot Hollow, Amber no longer recognized her own life. Danny had become a shell, silent, pale, and always drawing. At first, it was just runes. Then symbols no one could translate. Then entire forest landscapes in charcoal. Trees with mouths, skies of bone, and eyes hidden in branches. Every morning, the same picture appeared on Danny's wall. A tree, split down the middle, something crawling out from inside. Amber tried psychologists, spiritualists, even a Catholic priest. None helped. Then came the dreams. Amber started waking in the middle of the night, with dirt under her fingernails. Her shoes were wet. Her window always open. One morning, she found herself standing barefoot in the backyard, whispering a name she didn't remember learning. Virelda. Jake had vanished 2 months earlier, left a voicemail with one word: run. No one had heard from him since. Amber knew she was being watched. Sometimes at night, she could see shapes just beyond the tree line. Not animals, not people, waiting. One night, Danny spoke for the first time in months. "They're not gone," she whispered. "You only buried the door." The return. Determined to end this, Amber went back to the cabin ruins. It wasn't there anymore. In its place was a stone staircase, half sunken, leading down into the earth, covered in the same runes Danny drew. She hesitated only a moment, then descended. The staircase twisted unnaturally, deeper than the earth should allow. The walls pulsed with fungus. Whispers surrounded her, some her name, some unrecognizable. Some sounded like Mark, others like Lauren. At the bottom, she found a mirror. Its surface was not glass, but water, dark, swirling. She leaned in. Her reflection blinked and smiled. Then it spoke. "We never left you." Hands burst from the mirror, dragging her through, elsewhere. She awoke on cold stone in a room lined with roots and bones. Tall statues of robed figures with eyeless faces stood in a circle, and in the center, a black tree grew, leafless, humming. Amber recognized it. Danny's drawing. A voice echoed from the dark. "You are the second vessel. The gate must remain open." A figure stepped into the light. It was Mark, or something wearing him. His face was pale, stretched too tight. His eyes completely black. "You left me here," he said softly. "But I've learned. I've seen what's beneath." Amber backed away. "You're not him." "I'm more," he replied, smiling. "They chose me." He gestured, and a new door opened in the roots. Behind it, a cathedral of wood and shadow. Massive, alive. Candles floated without flame. Voices sang a twisted hymn in reverse. On an altar of black stone lay Lauren, eyes sewn shut, still breathing. "They need one more," Mark whispered. Amber turned to flee, but the roots closed behind her. Back home, Danny woke in a cold sweat and gasped. "She's gone." Drawings poured from her hands, pages and pages, faster than humanly possible. The tree, the mirror, the cathedral, Amber. Then something new, a clock, buried, counting down. A new presence. 3 nights later, in the abandoned Graveroot Hollow Visitor Center, a group of ghost hunters streamed a live investigation, laughing, taunting the legends. At exactly 3:33 a.m., their stream cut out. When police arrived the next morning, they found only a single thing left behind, a single charcoal sketch pinned to the wall. Amber, standing beneath the black tree, smiling. Final scene. In the underground cathedral, Amber now stood next to Mark. Her eyes were hollow, her skin marked with runes. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was humming. Beneath the cathedral, the ground pulsed with light. The witches stirred in the roots. Dellingham changed. It started subtly. The morning mist lingered too long. Birds stopped returning in the spring. People forgot their dreams, but woke with muddy feet and scratches on their arms. Then the trees began growing closer to the town, not just in the woods, through concrete, through homes, through people. At the church, Father Griggs awoke one morning to find vines crawling from the confessional, wrapping tightly around the crucifix. The stained glass cracked, the Virgin Mary's eyes weeping sap. By evening, the church bells rang on their own, once loudly At 3:33 a.m., Danny heard it from her bedroom and drew all night. Pages soaked in sweat and ink. By morning, she had filled an entire journal. The hollowing has begun. Amber is the first root. We're next. Sheriff Harlan's discovery. Sheriff Ruth Harlan, who had once laughed at the ghost stories of Graveroot Hollow, wasn't laughing anymore. She stood over the exhumed body of her deputy, Tommy King. Except it wasn't his body anymore. His flesh was paper thin. His insides were bark, and carved into his chest was a rune she had seen only once before, on a drawing she confiscated from Danny Thompson 3 months ago. That same day, the town's entire eastern road crumbled, swallowed by sinkholes that oozed roots and stagnant water. Anyone who tried to leave turned back around in confusion, unaware they'd driven in a perfect circle. They were trapped, and something was waking beneath their feet. The sound beneath the school, Middleton High School, became the first official closed building. The floors buckled in one night. The janitor, Mr. Bellamy, called in a complaint before disappearing entirely. When they searched, they found a hole beneath the gymnasium, a perfect spiral staircase made of bone and stone. Principal Green descended with 2 officers. Only one officer came back. His mouth was filled with black moss. "I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request." The officer's final words were whispered in Latin. Danny, hearing the recordings, translated, "The tree is dreaming, and the dream is spreading." Return of Jake. Out of nowhere, Jake came back. He walked into the sheriff's office barefoot, eyes bloodshot, body covered in scratches and old scars. "I went east," he rasped, "as far as I could. There's no out, just more forest. The map loops. The world's folding inward." He had been gone for 2 months, but his hair had grown years longer. His nails looked like claws. "I saw Amber," he added. "She's not Amber anymore." "She's what?" Sheriff Harlan asked. He looked up, terrified. "She's the bride of the Hollow. She's feeding it." Danny's transformation. Back in her home, Danny stopped sleeping. Her room was lined with candles, sketches nailed to the walls, ceiling and floor. One sketch kept recurring, an ancient wooden tower, taller than the trees, crowned with screaming faces and endless roots coiled around it. She called it the listening tree. She hadn't spoken for 2 weeks, until one night she stood in her doorway and said, "It's going to grow through us." Her mother collapsed that night, eyes wide open, blood leaking from her ears. She had a splinter the length of a pencil lodged in her throat. Danny never cried. She simply picked up her charcoal and began drawing a figure no one had seen before. A tall woman in a black dress, her hands bound in thorns, her mouth sewn shut, her eyes replaced with small silver bells. She named her Ferelda, the Root Queen. Dellingham's collapse. In 1 week, 9 residents disappeared without a trace. The mayor was found hanging upside down in his office, cocooned in vines. The lake boiled, then froze solid in 1 hour. Phones stopped working. Power flickered only between 3 and 4 a.m. Whispers passed from child to child. "Don't look in the mirror. If you hear music, don't hum along. If you see the hollow bride, shut your eyes or she'll climb inside." The local newspaper tried one final headline. "Beyond the woods, has Dellingham been taken?" The presses stopped that afternoon. Their buildings sank into the ground. Final revelation? Danny finally spoke to Jake. "We didn't close the gate," she said. "We gave it a root system. Amber isn't trapped. She's spreading. She's the hollow now. And we," she pointed to her heart, then his, "we're her seeds." Jake shook his head. "We have to fight it." "You can't fight a forest," she said. "You either burn it or become it." Final scene. Deep beneath Dellingham, in a cathedral that no longer sleeps, the black tree grows. Its bark pulses with blood. Faces emerge in its bark, eyes flickering open. Amber stands beside it, silent, robed in shadow, a crown of thorns twisting on her head. At her feet lie 2 stone slabs, freshly carved. Danny Thompson, Jake Rivers. A bell tolls once. The ground. 3 months later, the town of Dellingham no longer appears on maps. The roads leading in are overgrown and twisted, now part of an impossible, ever-shifting labyrinth of dark forests. GPS devices loop endlessly. Compasses spin in circles, and anyone who gets close reports nausea, hallucinations, and the sensation of being watched by something just behind the trees. The U.S. government quietly quarantined the area. A fabricated wildfire was the official explanation. Black-suited agents in biohazard suits set up a perimeter. None of them returned. Inside the dead zone, Dellingham still stands, but it is not the town it once was. It breathes. Danny's awakening. Danny Thompson hadn't left the library's basement in 34 days. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't slept. Yet she was very much alive. She was changing. Every page she touched inked itself. Her eyes had turned solid white. And when she spoke in 2 voices, hers and something deeper, older, that echoes through walls. She spent her days drawing maps, routes that stretched far beyond Dellingham. When Jake returned, he found the walls covered with phrases. The hollow doesn't end, it sleeps in layers. The first forest was not made by God. Virelda waits beneath the ash sky. Jake had scars on his back from fighting through the forest. He carried the journal that once belonged to Mark, and a map that should not have existed. One thing was clear. The hollow was spreading through the earth like a parasite, and Amber, or what she had become, was its queen. Amber's reign, deep within the cathedral, beneath what used to be the town square, Amber sat on a throne of bone and bark. Her body was no longer human. Roots grew from her skin. Her hair moved like willow branches in a silent wind. Eyes blinked across her chest and arms. Her mouth almost. But when it did, it echoed for miles. I am the door. I am the root. I am the silence between screams. Around her, the witches stirred, half-forgotten remnants of the coven that began the ancient ritual centuries ago. They bowed before Amber now, their magic twisted into something far more terrible. Above them, the black tree grew taller. It had pierced the earth's crust, and now it was calling to others. Beyond Dellingham, elsewhere in the world, strange forests appeared overnight. In Norway, a boreal forest turned black within hours. A group of scientists vanished investigating it. In Argentina, vines burst through city streets and whispered in dead languages. In Siberia, entire villages were swallowed by snow that smelled of ash and sap. Each time, the same signs appeared. Trees with faces, mirrors that bled. A figure in white standing beneath a dark tree. whispers spoke a name no one could trace. Virelda, the cult of the Hollowback in Delhi. Survivors who had seen the black tree and returned changed. Some aged decades overnight. Others bore brands on their skin that glowed under moonlight. They called themselves the Rooted. Their leader, a pale woman with hollow eyes, claimed to have spoken directly to the Root Queen. "We are not being conquered," she said to her growing flock. "We are being harvested, enlightened, hollowed out so we may bloom." They wore bark masks. They carried children into the woods and did not return. Some say they became trees. Danny's vision. Danny, who still remembered her humanity, had a vision one night while tracing the oldest rune in her journal. She saw the beginning, not of the hollow, of the world, a forest older than light, before oceans, before stone, a forest that had no top, no bottom, a place made not of trees, but of memory and silence and rot, and from it something emerged, a shape that would become known through time as the first witch, Virelda. She whispered her truths into roots, buried them in soil, waited. Then, in the 1600s, desperate witches, fleeing burning stakes, stumbled upon that old knowledge, tried to use it, and instead invited it in. And now, it was waking again. Jake's mission. Jake had spent weeks tracking whispers across the hollow. He believed there was a counterspell, written in a lost language from before mankind, a final rune hidden in the center of the hollow earth, below even the black tree. But to reach it, someone had to willingly enter the root gate, a living portal said to exist only when three things occurred. The Hollow Queen whispered your name. The bells rang 13 times at 3:33 a.m., and the sky turned ash gray for one full night. That night had arrived. The bells began to toll, and Jake, Danny, and 3 survivors from the edge of Dellingham, Father Griggs, ex-soldier Mia Lopez, and blind musician Rowan, stood before a massive arch of living bark, pulsing like a... Jake turned to Danny. "Once we cross, there's no coming back." Danny said nothing. Her eyes glowed. Together, they stepped through. Final scene. Far beneath the earth, beneath the bones of cities and oceans, they entered the hollow earth. There was no light. There was only wood, roots, faces pressed into bark, memories stitched into branches. They heard screaming, and then silence. In the distance, something impossibly massive moved, like a god-shaped tree, and in the shadows, Amber's voice, soft and terrible, whispered, "Welcome home." A forest beneath the world. They had walked for what felt like days. Jake, Danny, Mia, Rowan, and Father Griggs, 5 survivors, now deep in the hollow earth, where time bled sideways and the trees whispered in forgotten tongues. The roots beneath them pulsed with memory. Each footstep echoed with someone else's voice. Sometimes it was their own, crying out, begging, whispering prayers they'd never spoken. No sun, no stars, just glowing lichen, the drip of black sap, and a sky of wood. The path was winding and alive, reshaping behind them. Every turn brought new horrors. A field of faces, all half swallowed by moss, eyes darting without bodies. A river of ash where skeletal fish sang lullabies. A tree that bled when spoken to. Rowan, blind but seeing more than anyone, held Danny's hand. "It's not a forest," he whispered. "It's a memory of the first pain, a planet-wide scar." The Rootwake. At the center of hollow earth stood the Rootwake, a living structure as tall as a mountain, shaped like a throne carved from the remains of forgotten gods. Its trunk split the ground like a wound, and its roots throbbed like veins. Amber stood at its base. She no longer resembled anything human. Her mouth was filled with teeth that faced inward. Her skin bore thousands of tiny branches, like veins made of wood. Her eyes were barked over, yet she saw everything. "Danny," she whispered across the distance. "You are the final key." The others froze. Danny stepped forward, no longer afraid. "I've seen it all," she said. "The first trees, the witches, the coven that buried the world. You think this ends in roots?" Amber tilted her head. "No, it begins in hollow." Collapse above ground. The hollow had reached Chicago. Skyscrapers split in half by growing trees that emerged from manhole covers. The sky turned pale and rippled like skin. Children stopped speaking and began drawing identical black trees, eyes bleeding ink. One by one, entire neighborhoods disappeared, replaced by silent groves no one could cut down. Global communication blacked out. Cities fell. Governments dissolved. What remained gathered in broken towns and called it the Age of Wood. The mirror circle back, below, Danny and the survivors reached a circle of mirrors. 13, each facing inward. Each reflected a version of themselves, twisted, aged, or broken. Father Griggs saw himself burning in a church of thorns. Mia saw her son, long dead, calling to her from inside a tree. Jake saw Mark, smiling. Danny saw herself as Amber. Rowan saw nothing. The Rootwake spoke through them all, dozens of voices overlapping. "Break the 13th. Enter the beginning." Jake raised his hand and shattered it with a stone. The mirrors cracked, then melted into a doorway of shadow. The origin. They stepped a place, older, a realm of root, echo, and timeless dark. Danny felt it immediately. She was not herself. She was all who had ever been consumed. The witches, the hollow brides, the tree-bound. Here was where Virelda had been born, not from womb, but from the morning of the world itself. They walked until they reached a monument, a monolith made of bone and bark, floating above an endless chasm. Etched into it was the final rune. Danny reached toward it. "You were always meant to be the vessel," Amber said from behind them, now impossibly near. "The hollow made you to write the ending, but the ending is a beginning." The choice everything paused. Amber held out her hand. "We can rebuild the world, one of trees, of silence, no war, no greed, no death." Father Griggs shook his head. "No soul either." Amber looked at him gently. "You already gave yours to a cross that never answered." Danny looked back at her friends, at the terror, at the pain, then at the monolith. She took. A surge of memory, not hers, flooded her mind. The first scream beneath the first tree. The sound of soil remembering blood. The witches packed, and then the last resistance. A spark buried beneath the horror. A name, Maria. A witch who refused the hollow and buried a counterspell deep in her dying breath. Danny opened her eyes. Amber screamed. The flame Danny turned, her veins glowing orange now. The monolith cracked, and fire, real fire, not made of bark or memory, exploded from within it. Flame met root, and for the first time in eons, the hollow recoiled. Amber collapsed, shrieking. The cathedral split. The sky above rippled. Forests across the world trembled. Jake grabbed Danny. "What did you do?" "I lit the Kindle rune. It's a memory of fire, the only thing the hollow can't consume." Above ground, cities began to emerge from the woods. Trees turned to ash. Birds returned. The mirrors shattered worldwide. But the root wake still stick. Laughing. "You think this ends me? You've just made me real." Final scene. The world split in two. Above, fires spread. The hollow shrieked. Below, Danny glowed with every name ever lost to the woods. Jake, Mia, Rowan, and Grigg stood behind her, blades of light in their hands, symbols written across their skin. The root wake roared, and Amber, now half forest, half goddess, rose from it, thundering, "We are the world you buried. Now you shall be the soil." Danny raised her hand. "Then may we be fire in your roots." The final battle had begun. Escapee. They called him Derek Claiborne, a former mental patient who vanished during a fire at Black Hollow Asylum. Officials believed he perished in the blaze. They were wrong. Years passed. The asylum was left abandoned, its gates rusted shut, its halls swallowed by vines and silence. That was until a small production crew arrived to shoot a low-budget horror documentary about haunted places left behind. Among the crew was Rachel, the assistant director, cautious and sharp. From the moment they stepped into the asylum, Rachel felt something was wrong. Not just creepy, wrong. The air was heavy, like the walls were watching. They started filming in the day, but as night fell, one of the crew members, Jay, vanished. His mic still buzzed in the headset, but his location jumped from room to room, as if something was dragging him. They found his camera later, facing a wall, capturing only the sound of breathing. One by one, the team began disappearing, always with the same signs: static-filled footage, strange symbols carved into walls, and inhuman growls echoing through the hallways. Rachel, desperate, combed through asylum records and uncovered the truth. Derek wasn't just a patient. He was Experiment 13. The doctors had tried to cure evil by surgically altering brain function. But the operation had created something worse. Derek no longer felt pain. He couldn't feel guilt. He became pure instinct, and he escaped during the fire, not to run, but to stay. He had been living beneath the asylum ever since, feeding on the animals, watching the trespassers, learning their patterns. And now, with people inside again, he was playing a new game: hunt and isolate. Rachel discovered a sealed chamber below the basement, a primitive den made of bones, videotapes, and pieces of clothing from dozens of victims. On the wall, scratched in blood, "Thank you for coming back." In the final act, Rachel is the last one alive. She manages to lure Derek into one of the sealed electroshock rooms. With the help of a backup generator, she fries the door shut behind him. but not before he slams his hand through the gap and brands her with his symbol, a crude eye with 3 slashes. She escapes into the forest at dawn, bloodied and barely alive, stumbling into the arms of police. The asylum is declared a crime scene. The footage is never released. But months later, Rachel looks in her mirror and sees something behind her. Just a flicker, the outline of a tall man with hollow eyes. On her shoulder, the brand glows faintly. And deep in the ruins of Black Hollow Asylum, the door is open again. Rachel had survived, but survival, she quickly realized, was not the same as escape. Weeks passed. Her physical wounds healed, but the scar on her shoulder, the crude eye with 3 slashes, never faded. In fact, it began to darken, pulsing under her skin when she got too close to a mirror, or a window, or the dark. She stopped sleeping, stopped trusting reflections, because he was still there. Not just Derek Claiborne, something else, something that had been born through him, a thing that had waited under Black Hollow Asylum for decades, growing strong in the rot, the silence, and the forgotten screams. Now it had touched her. Now it wanted in. Rachel checked herself into a trauma recovery clinic in upstate Vermont, hoping isolation would help. The place was serene, surrounded by dense pine woods, and far from any news, cameras, or hospitals. But it didn't take long before things went wrong. First, her roommate vanished. Then, her files did, wiped clean like she'd never arrived. Soon after, the staff began calling her Rebecca, not Rachel. Security cameras showed her wandering halls at night, whispering to herself. She didn't remember any of it. Then came the dreams, not of Derek, but of the symbol on her shoulder. It would open like an eye, and she'd fall into it, descending stairwells that had no end. At the bottom was a room, the room, Derek's chamber beneath the asylum. But now, in her dreams, it was empty. She wasn't being chased anymore. She was being waited for. Desperate, Rachel contacted Dr. Halverson, a former psychiatrist who worked at Black Hollow before it was shut down. He'd vanished after the fire, presumed dead. But he was alive and hiding. He told her the truth. Derek Claiborne had been the vessel, not the source. The asylum wasn't built to treat patients. It was built to contain a presence older than the building itself. A psychic infection. A darkness that wore people like masks until their minds shattered. Halverson called it the Echo. It chooses a host every few decades, he said, voice trembling. It found Derek. Now it's found you. Rachel refused to believe it. But that night, she found her pillow soaked in black fluid. Her skin was cold, and the mirror whispered her name. With Halverson's help, Rachel tracked down the location of the mirror chamber, an experimental wing of Black Hollow's underground, long sealed and forgotten, even by the staff. It was said to house echoes of the mad. They needed to get back in, to find the chamber, to end it, to trap the echo once and for all. But when they returned to the ruins, the asylum was gone, burned to the ground. The fire was no accident. It had started from within, just like last time. Only this time, it hadn't tried to escape. It had moved on. The echo was no longer tied to the place. It was tied to R. Back at the clinic, patients began disappearing again. This time, no footage, no evidence, just vacant beds and bleeding mirrors. And late at night, in the reflection of the black lake behind the facility, Rachel saw her own face grinning back at her, lips moving in reverse. "You're not escaping," it whispered. "You're becoming." The eye on her shoulder blinked, her vision blurred, and somewhere deep in the woods, something with Derek Claiborne's voice began to laugh. Rachel was changing, not just emotionally, not just mentally, but physically. She could feel it in her bones, in her reflection, in the way people recoiled from her in the hallway before their eyes glazed over, like they forgot she existed. She used to think Derek Claiborne was the monster, but now she wasn't so sure, because when she looked in the mirror, when she really looked, she didn't see him anymore. She saw something worse. The clinic fell silent after the fourth patient disappeared. Rooms were empty, the halls echoing. The staff had gone or were taken. Rachel wandered the building alone. Doors no longer locked, alarms no longer sounded. The entire place had become a maze of flickering lights and growing whispers, voices chanting backward, repeating her name in choking gasps. She was no longer being haunted. She was being prepared. Desperate for answers, Rachel returned to Dr. Halverson's cabin, but found the door splintered open, blood smeared across the walls, and a single word carved into the floor: host. In the basement, she found a VHS tape still playing on loop. Halverson's last recording. His face pale, shaking. It's inside her now. Derek was just the first. Rachel is the true vessel. The echo never wanted a prisoner. It wanted a door. And it was opening. Rachel collapsed. When she awoke, she was strapped to a gurney. A familiar room, fluorescent lights, metal walls, a hospital, but not the clinic. The black hollow mirror wing, restored, whole, alive. But how? The halls were polished, the lights bright. A nurse passed by humming an old lullaby. For a moment, it felt real, like time had turned back, like the fire never happened, until Rachel looked down. The gurney was made of bone, and her arms were melting into it. She screamed. The lights burst. The walls. The mirror wing was an illusion, a memory imposed on reality by the echo now buried in her mind. Claiborne had only glimpsed this power. Rachel was becoming it. Inside the mirror, she saw a version of herself, fully overtaken, black-eyed, smiling. It reached toward her from inside the glass, whispering, "When you accept me, the world will see what it's always ignored." Behind the reflection stood hundreds of others. Claiborne, the patients, the vanished crew, the missing clinic staff, all trapped behind the glass like trophies. And one by one, their eyes turned to her. She ran, out of the ruins, into the woods. But something followed. Not Claiborne, not a man, not even a shape. Just a sound. A memory too large to hold. A presence that peeled reality open wherever she stepped. Rachel fled for the nearest town. But the world was changing around her. Mirrors in gas stations cracked when she passed. Dogs barked and ran. People forgot her. Rachel no longer recognized the world around her. The towns she passed through seemed familiar, yet slightly altered, as if a film of distortion clung to everything. Street signs flickered between names. Faces in crowds stared too long, then turned blank, glassy-eyed, forgetting they had ever seen her. She was unraveling, not just inside, But reality was unraveling with her. Every time she saw her reflection, in mirrors, puddles, windows, she'd lose a second of time. Sometimes an hour, sometimes longer. The Rachel on the other side of the glass was taking her place piece by piece. The eye branded into her shoulder now pulsed at random. Once, while staring into the reflection of a passing bus, she saw it open fully. And when it did, she heard screaming. Thousands of them. Rachel began to notice patterns. Every town she entered had one thing in common: a missing person, vanished in the night, their rooms left untouched, but their mirrors shattered. It was spreading, the echo, using her as a carrier. She realized she wasn't alone anymore. A man, pale, tall, eyes glassy, had started appearing in the corners of crowds. He never approached, never spoke, but each time he was closer. She called him the Watcher. He had Claiborne's face, but not his soul. Rachel believed this thing was part of the echo, or maybe what the echo used to be before it found her. Desperate, Rachel tracked down the ruins of the asylum's founder's mansion. Hidden deep in the Pennsylvania hills, the man who built Black Hollow to contain the echo in the 1800s. The mansion was a mausoleum of occult journals, broken mirror pieces, and ritual diagrams drawn in blood. In the lowest chamber, Rachel found an ancient mirror wrapped in chains, not glass, but obsidian. Etched around its frame, within the glass lies the mouth. Feed it, or be fed. The obsidian mirror whispered when she got close. Not words, memories. Hers, replayed backward. The moment she entered the asylum, the moment she first saw Claiborne, the moment she touched the mark. The mirror was the echo's heart, but it was cracked. It needed her to heal. She realized then the echo wasn't just some malevolent entity. It was a parasite trapped between reflections, feeding on fear and identity, desperate to be born fully into the real world. Claiborne had let it taste flesh. Rachel was going to let it walk freely, unless she ended it. Rachel attempted the ritual to sever the bond, guided by the old journals and symbols. But the moment she began, every mirror in the mansion shattered. Blood seeped from the walls. The Watcher stepped through the doorway, no longer silent, no longer patient. His voice was hers. "I've already left the glass, Rachel. You were never meant to stop me. You were meant to be me." She ran, but the mansion folded in on itself, trapping her underground, in a tomb of mirrors. Each one showed a version of her that had already given in. She clutched her shoulder, screamed, and pressed her palm to the obsidian mirror. Light burst. Time fractured, and the world above shifted. Somewhere in the city, a little girl stared into a puddle and didn't see herself. A mirror in a hotel room fogged and spelled, "I am here," backward. Security footage in a subway station flickered. A pale woman with empty eyes, walking past every screen at once. Rachel is gone. Or maybe she's everywhere now. The echo is no longer waiting behind mirrors. It walks freely, and it remembers you. They say if you say her name into a broken mirror 3 times, the room will go silent. That's the first sign. The second is your reflection stops copying you. The third, you never leave. The world calls it an urban legend, just another internet horror story. but the missing keep piling up. No sign of break-ins, no struggle. Just one thing left behind every time. A shattered mirror and a single symbol etched nearby. The eye with 3 slashes. The same mark Rachel Claiborne bore when she disappeared. Months have passed. The media buried it. The asylum, the footage, the tapes, all erased or lost in technical errors. Even Dr. Halverson's name yields nothing. Wiped clean, forgotten. But underground forums whisper the truth. Rachel isn't dead. She's the new vessel. The echo now has a face, and it's learning how to control a world full of reflections. A man named Connor Hayes, former paranormal investigator and survivor of an early incident at Black Hollow, begins searching for clues after his niece vanishes under the same circumstances. Mirror broken, door locked from inside, no trace. But her phone left one final recording, a reversed voice whispering, "I see you too." Connor digs into Black Hollow's ashes and uncovers the impossible. Records of a secret mirror plane beneath the physical world. A labyrinth of memories, reflections, and copies. A place the echo has built using the minds of those it consumed. He calls it the Glint Realm, and Rachel is the queen of it now. Connor tracks down one of the last functioning devices used in the asylum, a refractive prism machine once used for testing mirror-induced. Streets are endless reflections of streets. Every building is a copy of one he's seen before. Warped, reversed, looped. He sees people, but none of them look back. Just pale, smiling faces with Rachel's voice, all whispering the same thing. "You're already me." Deep in the center, he finds her, Rachel, or what's left of her. She sits on a throne of fractured memories, eyes like shards of obsidian. Around her float versions of herself from every timeline. The girl before the asylum, the survivor, the monster, the ghost, all of them watching him. She weeps, but her tears fall upward. "You shouldn't have come," she says. Every time someone enters, the echo grows stronger. The more minds it touches, the more real it becomes. Connor begs her to fight it, to remember who she was. Rachel reaches out, and for a brief moment, he sees the girl who survived Black Hollow, the girl who fought Claiborne, the girl who tried to escape. But the echo is Dee. She leans close and whispers, "You thought you were here to save me, but I brought you here to feed it." The mirrors in the real world begin cracking in unison. Across cities, hospitals, airports, reflections no longer wait for movement, and more people, random, innocent people, begin vanishing. Connor's body is found in a motel bathroom, drowned in a dry bathtub. Etched on the mirror above him, "Welcome to the other side." Somewhere, in every mirror, every screen, Rachel's face watches, smiling, waiting. The world was no longer whole. Something had broken. A thin membrane between the real and the reflected had torn wide open. It started small. A cracked mirror here. A child muttering backward syllables in their sleep. Photographs with duplicate people in the background. People no one remembered taking the picture with. And then the disappearances returned. Faster. Stranger. People were vanishing in broad daylight, walking past a shop window and simply not coming out the other side. Entire surveillance cameras caught them stepping forward, then never finishing the step, like reality had erased them mid-breath. But the worst were those who came back. They looked normal, until you looked too long. In an underground facility outside Baltimore, a rogue black site known as Project Prism was reactivated. The government had known about Black Hollow for decades. They'd sealed it, burned it, buried it. But the Echo was smarter than they had feared, and now it had Rachel Claiborne's memories, her pain, her thoughts, her desires. It had emotion. It could manipulate. Agent Kira Locke had seen horrors in her time with Prism. Mass hallucinations, mass vanishings. The town in Idaho that existed for 6 minutes and then blinked out, leaving nothing but foundations and family photo albums. But this was different. The Echo wasn't just a parasite anymore. It had built a kingdom, and Rachel was still in there, not alive, not dead. Something in between, something becoming more. Prism devised a weapon, a resonance pulse tuned to anti-reflective frequencies, designed to collapse the Echo's structure inside the Glint realm. But it required someone to go in, to carry it into the mirror realm and detonate it at the center. Only one person knew the way. Rachel's brother, Eli Claiborne. He had been there when she was first institutionalized, had watched her unravel, had run from it all, leaving her behind. And he agreed. Eli crossed over through a quantum prism gate. What he saw defied reason. The Glint realm had grown. Not just copies of places, but ideas. Rooms that looped. Skies that bled. Children made of glass. A train that ran on screams and carried passengers with no faces. The throne room was a cathedral of mirrors floating in the void. Rachel waited there, suspended in gravity, wrapped in her own hair like a cocoon, whispering dozens of voices at once. You always ran, Eli, but now I've made a place you can never leave. He begged her to remember, to come back. He showed her their mother's necklace, sang the lullaby they grew up with, screamed. For a flicker, she paused. For a blink, she cried. And then the Echo surged. Eli activated the pulse. It exploded in a ring of light, breaking mirrors across both worlds. For a moment, every screen, puddle, lens, and glass surface glitched. Around the world, millions screamed as their reflections screamed last. The Glint realm collapsed, or so they thought. Eli was pulled back through the gate, unconscious, the device scorched. But the silence that followed didn't last, because something new had come through with him. Not Rachel, not the Echo, but a hybrid. Now, Prism is in lockdown. Mirrors removed. Cameras disabled. Eli's reflection doesn't match his movements. And sometimes, when he's asleep, the windows whisper. Something survived. Something smarter. Something patient. The Echo isn't coming anymore. It's already here. Watching through every screen. Listening through every reflection. Learning from you. The Echo had changed. What once was a parasite hiding in reflections now had a foothold in the waking world. Fractured, incomplete but alive. It no longer needed mirrors. It had found hosts. It wore their skin like clothes. It spoke through them in backwards lullabies. And it had a plan. Project Prism had locked Eli Claiborne in a glassless chamber deep underground. No screens, no reflective surfaces. Even the steel walls were scorched matte black. He hadn't slept in days. Because every time his eyes closed, he saw it, the door made of mirrors. Always waiting, always open a little wider. Worse than the visions were the sounds. Whispers in the vents, voices of people long dead, and the rhythmic tapping, like fingers on glass, echoing from nowhere. Prism's director, Dr. Lennox, wanted to extract whatever came back with Eli during the collapse. They believed there was still a part of Rachel inside him. But what they didn't realize was, it wasn't Rachel trying. It was everything else she took with her. At the same time, across the country, mirror-based deaths skyrocketed. A woman in Seattle was found inside a shattered art installation, her body perfectly intact, but turned to glass. A man in Detroit filmed himself walking into a public restroom and never came out. Only his camera remained, playing a loop of him brushing his teeth with no reflection. In Austin, a teacher burst into flames when the classroom projector turned on. A brief flash of Rachel's face was seen before the screen fried. These weren't hauntings, these were rehearsals. Back in the Prism facility, Eli began drawing symbols he didn't remember learning. Runes, circles. One in particular kept repeating. A cracked eye, bleeding from the pupil, surrounded by 5 shards, the Eye of Return. Rachel had once carved it into the wall of her padded cell. Now Eli whispered its name in his sleep. Prism decided to perform a direct interface, to plug Eli into the Memory Echo Interface, MEI, and map his subconscious. It was a mistake. The moment the machine powered on, the lights died. Backup generators failed, and in the flicker of red emergency strobes, monitors across the lab turned on, all showing Rachel, not screaming, not broken, smiling. Her voice echoed through every speaker. "You thought you locked me out, but I left a key inside him." The lights went out. Security footage showed the impossible. Reflections moving in the dark, stretching from one screen to another. Scientists convulsed as their shadows split off and stood on their own. Eli disappeared in the chaos. All that was left in his cell was one word smeared on the wall in blood: replace. Now Prism is gone. The building is abandoned, empty, powerless. But cameras still flicker when people pass it. And if you look too long into its windows, you'll see someone staring back. A tall man with Rachel's eyes and Eli's smirk. He watches and waits, because the echo has found a new way to spread, not just through mirrors, but through memory. You don't need to see it anymore. Just remember it. Somewhere, a child wakes up from a nightmare and says, "The lady in the mirror taught me how to pretend to be me." Somewhere else, a morgue technician swears a corpse smiled at him through the reflection of her toe tag. And somewhere, in the space between the glass and your gaze, something new is learning how to blink. The echo is no longer trying to escape. It wants to become. And every time you look at your reflection and feel that split-second delay, that's not lag. That's it learning to match you. Weeks passed since the Prism facility went dark. No news coverage, no official statements. The government quietly erased its digital footprint. Employees listed as transferred. Survivors, if there were any, were never seen again. But online, whispers grew louder. People who remembered the Black Hollow incident started sharing similar dreams. Cold white rooms, dripping mirrors, and a girl humming a lullaby in reverse. All of them described the same final image. A door made of glass, cracked open, and something watching from the other side. One man refused to forget. Dr. Marcus Elwin, former cognitive neuroresearcher for PRISM, had fled before the fall. He'd seen what they brought back with Eli Claiborne. The parasite made flesh, voice, and mirror, and knew it wasn't just a ghost. It was an invasion plan, a psychological virus that didn't infect the body, but the mind. He began developing what he called the reflection protocol, a fail-safe memory structure designed to resist the echo's influence. A cognitive labyrinth, a maze of one's own making. But he had a problem. It required someone to enter the glint realm willingly, with a stable mind and a strong anchor to reality. Someone with a reason to go back in. He found her in Nevada. Cassie Wynn, age 23, former asylum nurse, the only other person to survive Black Hollow besides Eli. Rachel had spared her once, had looked into her eyes and whispered, "You still believe in people. That's what makes you break easiest." Cassie had tried to build a life again, moved to the desert, worked nights, avoided mirrors. But nightmares still stalked her sleep, and shadows sometimes moved when she didn't. When Dr. Elwin came to her door, she didn't hesitate. "If there's a chance Rachel's still in there, I'll find her." They entered the glint realm through a refracted dream state, Elwin's machine tapping into lucid dreaming and the last known coordinates of Eli's interface memory. Inside, things had changed. Gone were the twisted echoes of Black Hollow. In its place stood an entire city of glass, infinite, fractured, alive. Streetlights blinked Morse code. Buildings sang through cracks in their walls. The sky rippled like pond water, touched by a scream. And Rachel's voice floated on the wind, narrating the city like a bedtime story. "Once upon a time, there was a world made of lies. So I built one made of truth. And now I just need someone to believe in it." Cassie and Elwin wandered the city, chased by doppelgangers, reflections of themselves with subtle distortions. Too many teeth, smiles that didn't blink, movements that predicted theirs instead of mimicking them. They found a central tower, the Mirror Spire, where Rachel was said to dwell. Inside, time fractured. Memories looped. Elwin saw himself begging Rachel for forgiveness. Cassie saw herself as a child, holding a bloody shard of glass and asking why her mother never looked at her the same again. At the top, Rachel waited, but she wasn't alone. Eli Claiborne was with her, changed, eyes like silver, a grin like static. No longer host, but harbinger. "She's not trapped anymore," he said. "She's queen now, and every time someone looks into glass, she learns a little more about your world." Elwin tried to reason, tried to trigger the protocol. Cassie stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. "Rachel, you were human once. You were scared. Let me help you remember." For one heartbeat, Rachel's eyes shimmered. For 1 second, her hand reached out. Then the tower collapsed. The glint realm began folding in on itself. Cassie screamed as Elwin shoved her through a rupture in the dream gate, sacrificing himself to hold the Bree. Cassie woke in a hospital, alone, but changed. Her reflection didn't follow her for 3 days, and when it finally did, it winked. In a dark room somewhere, hundreds of cameras flickered. Monitors displayed reflections from around the world. Children, strangers, politicians, soldiers, all slightly out of sync, and Rachel sat in the center of it all, smiling, growing. The more you look, the more I live. The echo no longer needs to break through. It's already inside. To be continued. Cassie Wynn was never the same after she returned. The doctors said she was dehydrated, hallucinating, suffering from sleep deprivation and mirror trauma, a term they invented just for her. But none of them could explain why her pupils no longer reflected light, or why cameras couldn't focus on her unless she was looking directly at them, or how every single mirror in the hospital cracked down the middle the night she was admitted. They called it a coincidence. Cassie knew better. Rachel was still watching, from inside her. Elsewhere, the world changed in subtle ways. More and more people began reporting phantom reflections, split-second glances where their mirror selves didn't move in sync. Some laughed, others whispered secrets. A rising number of suicides took place in bathrooms. Police reports always mentioned the same final words scribbled on the walls. It wasn't me in the mirror. A viral TikTok trend emerged where users filmed themselves staring into mirrors under red light for 5 minutes. Over 70% of them deleted their accounts afterwards. 5 vanished completely. The echo had found its way into the stream. Through screens, through lenses, through memory. Cassie was discharged and disappeared, but not before leaving a note. The city of mirrors is expanding. Rachel is no longer bound by reflection. She's building a new kind of world, one that begins in your thoughts. That same night, the mirrored ones appeared. First sightings came from London. Tall, still figures standing silently in alleyway puddles, only visible through a lens or a reflection. Then in Tokyo, a subway train pulled into a station with all windows blacked out. When the doors opened, no one was aboard, but passengers reported hearing footsteps behind them for days afterward. One little girl in Vermont swore her imaginary friend could only be seen in the back of a spoon. She called her Rachel, and Rachel called her replacement. Meanwhile, inside what remained of the glint realm, Rachel had changed. She no longer wandered in white gowns or whispered lullabies. She wore mirrors now, armor made of shattered reflections from thousands of minds. A walking hive of memories, a god of broken glass. And beside her stood Eli Claiborne, her guardian, or her echo. He no longer spoke. He no longer breathed, but he remembered everyone who ever looked into a mirror with fear, and they were coming back to him. Cassie's mission wasn't over. She found Dr. Elwyn's final prototype, a resonance lock, a device capable of closing psychic bleed points, but only if activated from within a breach. Cassie planned to go back one last time, not to save Rachel, but to seal her in. She carved runes into her skin, memorized every countersymbol Prism had created, ingested dream triggers, and stepped into the breach with her eyes open. She woke in a house made entirely of framed photographs. Each photo was a memory. Hers, Rachel's, Eli's, yours. They whispered to her as she walked through them. One showed her mother crying in a mirror. One showed Rachel not dying in the asylum. One showed Cassie staring into a mirror that didn't exist yet. Rachel met her in the heart of it. "You still think this is about me?" Rachel said. "I was just the first to listen." Cassie begged her to stop. Rachel offered her a mirror. Cassie looked in. What she saw was not herself. It was a world already taken. Cities with no windows, people with no eyes, laughter echoing from the clouds. Children born mirrored from birth. And behind it all, Rachel, smiling, infinite. Cassie triggered the lock. A shriek echoed across the glint realm as every reflection shattered at once. The world pulsed. Silence. Cassie woke in her apartment. Normal. Alive. The mirrors were intact. No voice. Then her phone lit up. A message from an unknown number. "Nice try, but you forgot. I'm not in the mirrors anymore. I'm in you." Her reflection didn't move. And then it smiled. Nyctophobia. For as long as she could remember, Leah Carter had been afraid of the dark. It wasn't the kind of fear you could outgrow. It was something bone deep, like her nervous system was wired to panic the moment the light disappeared. As a child, she slept with 3 nightlights. As an adult, she kept every room in her apartment lit, even at night. Her therapist called it nyctophobia, but names didn't matter when the lights went out. Now, at 28, Leah lived alone in a 3rd-floor unit of a run-down building in Boston. It was cheap, and more importantly, always bright. She installed LED strips along her ceilings, motion lights in the halls, and even a battery-powered lamp under the bed. She never let the dark win. Until the storm. It started as a typical Friday night. Rain tapped softly on the windows. Leah sat on her couch, watching an old sitcom and sipping tea. At 10:07 p.m., the lights flickered once. Then again. Then they died. Leah froze. "No, no, no, no," she whispered, lunging for her phone. She flicked on the flashlight. Relief, but short-lived. The beam flickered too. The battery showed 8%. She bolted for the drawer where she kept her backup flashlight. It was dead. So was the emergency lantern. And then the phone died too. She was in total darkness. Her breath quickened. Her body trembled. Every rational thought drowned beneath a wave of instinctual terror. She fumbled to the kitchen, opened the fridge. Nothing. Dead. She whispered to herself, "It's just a power outage. Just a blackout." But that didn't explain the cold breath she felt on her neck. She spun around. Nothing. Just silence and shadow. Then came the scratching, faint, like fingernails against drywall. It was coming from inside the walls. Then a second sound, whispering. Low, distant, yet right beside her. "Turn off the lights. Join us." Leah screamed, stumbling back, crashing into the table. A sharp pain lance. She was bleeding. The whispering got louder. She crawled toward her closet, where she kept candles. Fumbled inside. Her fingers brushed wax, then something else. A hand. Cold. Clawed. She yanked away and slammed the door. Crawled into the bathroom, slammed that door too, and sat in the tub, gasping for breath. From beneath the door, blackness seeped in. Not just shadow, but something alive, crawling, reaching. She squeezed her eyes shut and whispered, "This isn't real. This isn't real." But then, Leah! A voice, raspy and wrong, whispered her name from inside the bathroom. She opened her eyes. The mirror was glowing, with words written in condensation. "Light cannot save you." She snapped. Leah kicked open the door and ran for the stairs. Every light in the building was dead. Every window covered in black mist. She pounded on her neighbor's door. No answer. She ran down the hall. More scratching, more whispering. And then, the Ella. Its doors slid open, revealing only pitch black. And a figure, tall, faceless, with long fingers curling into the lightless hall. You were warned, it hissed. You were kept safe by fear. Now, you're mine. Leah turned and ran back into her apartment. The shadows followed. They didn't need to move quickly. The dark was everywhere now, wrapping around her, reaching into her lungs, into her thoughts, pulling memories from her childhood, nights where she cried for help but never came, dreams where something stood at the foot of her bed, whispering, soon. It had waited, all these years, and now her fear had ripened. In the final seconds before she passed out, Leah reached for the nightstand drawer. Inside was a flashlight. She clicked it on. For a brief moment, the creature recoiled. The walls screamed, but the battery sputtered. The light died, and the last thing she heard was laughter, loud, ancient, inhuman. She awoke in darkness. She wasn't in her apartment anymore. This place felt wrong. A basement? A cave? Her eyes adjusted to the faint red glow pulsing from the walls. She wasn't alone. Around her, others stood, motionless, hollow-eyed, their mouths stitched shut, their faces locked in frozen screams. Each held a candle. Each candle was out. She tried to scream, but no sound came, and from the far corner, a familiar voice whispered, "Now you live in the dark, Leah. Forever." Leah could barely move. The air was thick, not just with cold, but with pressure, like 1,000 unseen hands pressed down on her skin. The flickering red glow from the cave walls pulsed like a heartbeat. She wasn't sure if it was the room's or hers. "Now you live in the dark, Leah, forever." That voice, cold, wet, metallic, echoed from every direction. She tried to scream again. Her throat felt torn, raw, useless. When she reached up to touch her lips, she realized her mouth wasn't stitched shut like the others. Not yet. But something was wrong with her hands. The skin was dry, flaking, fingertips blackened, as if the darkness had started eating her. Around her, the others remained still, lifeless, but not dead. Some shifted slightly, as if hearing voices Leah couldn't. Some wept silently. All of them were afraid, and that fear fed the place, fed him. The whispers returned, crawling up the back of her spine like centipedes. The fee. But too much, and it opens the door. You opened it, Leah. You let us in. Her mind reeled. Was this hell? A dream? Psychosis? She thought back to that night in the orphanage. The first time she'd ever screamed in the dark. The night her best friend Maya had disappeared from the room beside hers. They found her weeks later, face twisted in terror, skin burned black like ash. The case was buried. The adults called it an accident. But Leah remembered the last thing Maya ever said. "It's in the dark, Leah. It waits for us in the dark." She had forgotten, until now. The glow faded. The cave pulsed once, then again. Something was coming. She heard footsteps, not one pair, but hundreds, crawling, slithering, scraping against stone. Shapes emerged from the far side of the cavern, some tall, some twisted, none human. Eyes glowed red like coals, mouths opened wide, not to scream, but to inhale. And as they breathed, the air dimmed further, pulling what little light remained from the space. Leah dropped to her knees. Her hands trembled, and in that moment, something inside her woke up. A voice. Not theirs. Hers. No more. She reached into her coat pocket, somehow still wearing it, and found the small LED keychain she always carried. She clicked it. It lit up. Only slightly. Barely enough to see. But the creatures shrieked. They recoiled like smoke in wind. Light. It hurt them. Leah rose slowly, raising the beam like a torch. Each step she took backward, the things inched further away. The red glow trembled. The walls cracked. And then a whisper, deep and furious. You were ours, Leah. The darkness chose you. You do not leave. She turned and ran. The beam flickered. The floor broke apart beneath her feet, turning to black dust. But she jumped, slipped, clawed her way across stones that felt like wet bone. She found a tunnel, one not pulsing red, but gray, cracked, dripping with water. She sprinted through it, gasping as screams filled the air behind her. Then, light, faint, a circle, far ahead, a manhole cover. She clawed up the rusted ladder, heart pounding. Her hands bled. Shadows licked at her heels. One last scream chased her. You'll never escape what's inside you. And then, daylight. She collapsed on cold asphalt. A street, an alley. The sun was rising. People passed by, ignoring her. No one saw the creatures behind the veil of the shadows. No one saw the tiny burns that lined her arms. Only she could see. Only she could hear the whispers still curling inside her ears. We are not gone. You brought us out. Now Leah doesn't fear the dark. She understands it, knows. They followed her out. They move in reflections, in the shadows between streetlights, in the moment when your eyes adjust and your heart skips. And every night, Leah sleeps with the lights on again. Not out of fear, but because they're watching her, waiting for her to turn them off just one more time. It had been 6 nights since Leah escaped the underground. Since she returned to the surface, nothing had felt the same. The daylight no longer brought comfort. It felt artificial, like a lie told to keep the masses calm. Shadows behaved strangely around her. The lines between night and day blurred more with each passing hour, and no matter how many lamps she turned on, the corners of her apartment always looked too dark. Worse, the whispers never stopped. You brought them up. They see through your eyes. You are the door now. She hadn't slept in days, not truly. When she closed her eyes, she dreamed of tunnels, of the stitched-mouthed souls, of him. She began researching, not just nyctophobia, but shared fears of the dark throughout history. That's when she discovered the legends, fragments found in ancient scrolls, oral stories across cultures, all pointing to one thing: the lightless ones, shadow-born entities that preyed on humanity long. They didn't kill outright. Instead, they fed on fear, growing stronger as children passed their nightmares to others. Their power was bound by belief and by light. And once every generation, they found a human so paralyzed by the dark, they could open the door. Leah wasn't sick. She was chosen. Her therapist refused to listen. "You're under extreme stress," he'd said. Fear can manifest in vivid hallucinations. But when she played him the recording she'd secretly made, a whisper from her bathroom mirror that said his name in reverse, he'd gone pale. He didn't call her crazy after that. He didn't say anything at all. The next day, he vanished. Leah kept searching. She reached out to online forums, dark web threads, horror communities where others spoke of similar things, of voices in the dark, figures at the edge of vision, red light behind mirrors. And in a deep, archived chat thread from a decade ago, she found it. A name. Maya Carter. Sister. Buried under her trauma, Leah had forgotten that she had once shared a room with someone taken during that terrible night at the orphanage. The police told her she had imagined Maya, that no such girl was registered. They erased her memories, drugged her for years until the fear buried the truth. But now she knew. Maya wasn't just taken. She was swallowed by the dark, claimed, and Leah had just led the monsters back out. The final entry from Maya in the chat thread chilled her. They lie in wait. The light keeps them from crossing completely, but they don't need to kill us. They only need one of us to let them in. If you're reading this and you remember my name, it's too late. That night, the shadows attacked, not from her closet or under the bed, but from inside the lights. They bent them, twisted them, turned her sanctuary into a glowing cage, then shattered it. The bulbs exploded. Sparks rained down. The entire apartment filled with ink-thick darkness, alive with motion. Figures circled her, whispering, laughing, breathing. You've broken the veil. They can see her. She is near. Leah reached for the only weapon she had left, the ritual. From Maya's notes, there was one place untouched by the lightless ones. A sanctum of mirrors, hidden beneath Boston's forgotten subway tunnels, sealed by ancient wards. There, the original gate had been closed. And now, it might be the only way to close it again. She lit a flare, grabbed her bag, and ran into the night. Every shadow stretched to follow. Every street lamp flickered in warning. She was not alone. She had never been. The entrance lay beneath a maintenance hatch, behind an abandoned platform. She climbed down the rusted ladder, the tunnel air thick with mold and regret. Strange symbols lined the walls, glyphs that pulsed faintly as she passed. Then she saw it. The sanctum. Dozens of old mirrors, framed in rotted gold, stood in a circle around a stone slab etched with names. Hers was among them. So was Maya's. And between them, a third, freshly carved. He who waits behind the glass. Leah stepped onto the slab. The air grew cold. All lights died. The mirrors turned black. Then, one by one, each reflected her image, but slightly wrong. Her face smiling when she wasn't. Her reflection whispering, though she was silent. "We are you," they said. "You are us." A door opened behind her, not physical, but psychic. And through it, Maya stepped out. Eyes hollow, hands stitched, voice trembling. "You opened the door, Leah, but you can still close it." Leah fell to her knees. How? Maya lifted her hand, revealing a shard of mirror. "You must become the dark. You must carry it back." The last thing Leah saw was her reflection, not running, not screaming, just standing there, smiling. The dark wasn't empty anymore. It watched her. It listened. It learned. Leah Carter didn't remember collapsing. She didn't remember screaming or falling or waking. She only remembered standing, motionless, within a circle of shattered mirrors, her fingertips bloodied from clawing at their edges. When her vision returned, the sanctum was quiet. The mirrors were all cracked. All except one. It stood alone at the center of the room, taller than the rest, completely clean, and shimmering not with her reflection, but with someone else's. Herself, but not. This version of Leah had no shadow, no pupils, just eyes like twin voids absorbing everything. She smiled. "You're learning to see," the reflection whispered. Leah backed away. The room shifted. The stone slab beneath her feet glowed faintly, the names on it rearranging themselves. Maya's name was gone. So was Leah's. In their place were two words: the host, the hunger. She unned. She had merged with it, become its voice, its vessel, a half-broken whisper carried through glass and fear. And now, Leah was next. But something had changed. Leah no longer felt helpless. She had been afraid of the dark her entire life. But fear, she now saw, was a currency. It could be traded, focused, weaponized. That's why they wanted it, because it gave them power. And if she could master it, she could turn it against them. She turned to the final mirror, took a deep breath, and stepped through. It felt like drowning in warm tar. For seconds, maybe minutes, she couldn't breathe, couldn't move. But when she emerged on the other side, she stood not in the sanctum, but in her childhood bedroom, the exact one from the orphanage. Same faded wallpaper, same squeaky wooden floor, same twin beds, hers and Maya's. Only now, Maya was sitting on the opposite bed, alive, still, smiling. "Do you remember what we did, Leah?" she asked softly. "You left me in there with it." A jolt of memory struck Leah like a punch. Maya's screams that night, muffled through the closet. The way Leah had covered her ears. How she hid under the blanket, too paralyzed to help. She hadn't just forgotten it. She'd buried it. "I was a child," Leah whispered. "I didn't know." "You knew," Maya interrupted, her voice crackling, deepening. "You knew the dark was hungry. You just hoped it would feed on me instead." Leah stepped back. The walls began to bleed shadow. Maya's face cracked like porcelain, revealing the thing beneath. Featureless, eyeless, with two wide teeth. The bed burst into flames, yet gave off no light. The thing stood. "Now you are the closet. You are the door, and it's time for you to open." Leah screamed, but not from fear, from resistance. The room tore apart around her, reality splintering like glass, memories scattered through the air, old birthdays, hospital lights. The night she first saw her shadow move on its own. She reached for one, a childhood drawing she'd once made. It showed her and Maya, holding flashlights, facing the dark. That was the memory that mattered. That was who she used to be. The void around her hissed, the creature recoiled, and then Leah opened her eyes, truly opened them, and saw everything. The world wasn't real, at least not this version of it. The mirror realm, the tunnels, the sanctum, they were constructs. A cage formed by her own fear, shaped and polished by the lightless ones. But cracks were showing, and through those cracks, she could see something else. A flicker. The real world. She gritted her teeth, gathered the shattered reflection of her younger self, and shoved it into the void. The creature howled. Reality snapped. And Leah woke up, for real this time, in a hospital bed. Lights hummed overhead. Machines beeped gently. A nurse gasped when the nurse whispered, "After 2 weeks in a coma." The doctors told her she had been found unconscious in the subway, muttering nonsense. No injuries. No signs of trauma. Just unresponsive. They didn't believe her when she said it wasn't a coma. It was a prison. They didn't believe her when she said they had followed her out. But they would soon. Because each night since she woke up, one mirror in her hospital room fogged up. And every morning there were words written in the steam, even when no one had used hot water. Last night, the message was simple. You're not free, Leah. You're just on the other side. Even after waking up, Leah never felt fully awake. The hospital walls were real. The lights overhead were fluorescent, but something was off. The shadows were still wrong. They bent in unnatural directions. They lingered. And sometimes, when she blinked, they moved, even when nothing else did. She wasn't alone in her room. Not really. The mirror by the sink had become a presence of its own. It didn't reflect her properly anymore. Not her expressions, not her movements. The Leah in the glass smiled at odd times. Sometimes she stared too long, even when Leah looked away. Then the words started appearing again. Steam, frost, or even blood-red streaks across the glass. She remembers now. The host is cracked. The door will swing wide. Leah wasn't just haunted. She was becoming something. She begged the doctors to remove all mirrors from her room. They agreed, for a day. But at night, something always brought them back. The first time, it was the screen of her heart monitor. It powered down, then flickered back on as a full, glossy surface. The second night, a pan of metal in the hallway caught a warped reflection of her face, smiling with teeth too sharp. By the third night, every reflective surface in the ward seemed drawn to her. They followed her, bent toward her, and one nurse, young, kind, curious, made the mistake of checking her reflection while Leah slept. She screamed before they found her. Blind, her eyes burned out from within, mumbling, "She's in the mirror, but she's not alone." Leah knew she had no time left. The thing that was once Maya, or at least wore her face, had infected the barrier between reflection and reality. She hadn't escaped the sanctum. She'd carried it with her. She found a name in the deepest corner of the dark web, buried under conspiracy threads and occult history. The Mirror Smith. A figure whispered about by ghost hunters and fringe demonologists, someone who claimed to craft objects capable of sealing dimensional tears. He had one address, an abandoned church in upstate Vermont. She discharged herself from the hospital without permission. The hallway mirrors screamed silently as she passed. Outside, even the street puddles reflected 2 moons in the sky. Reality was fraying. She drove through the night. The church was real. Crumbling stone, stained glass windows long shattered, candles flickering in the wind, even though no one had lit them. Inside, the pews had been rearranged in a perfect circle around an altar. And behind that altar, sat a man, or what used to be one. His eyes were covered in silver coins, sealed by wax. His voice rasped like rust scraping metal. "You've brought it back with you," he said, "the one behind the mirrors." Leah nodded. "How do I send it back?" He laughed, a wet, hollow sound. "You don't. You never send it back. You replace it." The ritual required a mirror with history, soaked in trauma. Leah offered the shard she'd taken from the sanctum. The mirror smith cut her hand with it. Her blood turned black before hitting the ground. He whispered names in a language that made her ears ring. The mirrors around them began to spin, not physically, but in their reflections. And then Maya stepped out again, full, complete, smiling. "You always return to me, sister," she whispered. "You left me in the dark. Now I leave you in the light." Suddenly, Leah understood. Maya wasn't trying to destroy her. She wanted her to take her place, to become the new gate. A soul trapped in the mirror realm could hold the lightless ones at bay, for a while. That's why the sanctum existed. It needed a keeper. Leah reached into the shard. Her reflection grinned, eyes glowing, and for the first time, Leah didn't flinch. She's not screaming, not resisting, but accepting. The darkness swallowed her. The mirror smith closed the ritual. The glass cooled. Maya was gone. Leah's body still stood before the altar, eyes blank, still breathing. But inside the sanctum, deep beyond the shattered reflections, a new figure stood at the center. A woman holding a flashlight, waiting, watching, guarding the veil. But something is changing. The shadows stir again. The mirror cracks anew. And outside the sanctum, in the real world, children have started fearing the dark again. They whisper of a woman with no eyes, appearing in reflections when the lights go out, and the message returns, written on foggy glass. The door is weakening. The world didn't notice when Leah vanished. No police search, no missing person alerts. It was as though the system had scrubbed her away, or worse, never logged her existence at all. But someone remembered. Lena, an overnight janitor at the hospital. She was quiet, unassuming, invisible to most, but she saw things, felt things. The night Leah disappeared, Lena had walked past her room and seen the mirror breathing. Not fogging, breathing. In, out, as though the glass had lungs. And behind that warped surface, Lena saw a face. Not Leah's, not Maya's. Something older, something waiting. Lena didn't sleep for 2 days. The mirror in her bathroom trembled every time she approached. Her phone camera refused to take photos if she was in the shot. And when she passed the window of a parked car, her reflection smiled without her. She didn't want to get involved. But then she found Leah's name, barely visible, scratched onto the underside of a mop bucket she used nightly. Under it, a single phrase, "The sanctum can't hold forever." Lena didn't know what it meant, but she knew where to go. The church was still there, still broken, still waiting. Inside, the wax-eyed mirror smith sat rigid in his pew, as though he'd never moved. His body was drying out, curling like a paper left in flame. But his voice echoed in Lena's head before she even asked. "You heard the whisper, didn't you? That means it knows your name." She nodded slowly. "Can I stop it?" The coins over his eyes cracked. "You're too late for that." Back in the sanctum, time flowed differently. Leah had stopped counting the days. Her flashlight no longer needed batteries. Her body never hungered. There were no mirrors here anymore, only reflections of memory, flickering like candlelight through smoke. She was alone, until she wasn't. She began to hear the whispers again. Not Maya, not the lightless ones. Someone new. A woman's voice, trembling, asking questions. Who are you? Where am I? Why do I see your face in the sink? Lena. Leah tried to respond, but all she could do was press her palm to the barrier between them, hoping Lena might see the ripple on the mirror's surface, hoping she might still be able to help. In Lena's world, the signs grew louder. The elevator in her apartment complex stopped working, but still opened every night at 3:13 a.m., revealing a hallway that shouldn't exist. Every photo she took showed a woman standing behind her, flashlight in hand, eyes hollow with light. She couldn't sleep, couldn't escape. And the whispers? They became instructions. She was being pulled toward something, a choice. The mirrorsmith gave her one final tool, a mirror knife. Forged from the silver of 7 cursed glass panes, it could cut through dimensions. Choose wisely, he rasped. You can free her, or you can seal them all away, but never both. Lena's hands shook as she took it. She returned home that night. The mirror in her hallway pulsed like a heart. Leah's face appeared one last time. She wasn't screaming. She was pleading. It's not just me, Leah whispered. If they break through, your world changes. Forever. Lena stared at her reflection, at the knife, at the darkness behind the glass, which now swirled like a storm. Then she reached out and cut a doorway open. Light exploded. Screams echoed across realities. Lena's body collapsed, hollow, drained, and something stepped through the doorway. Not Leah, not Maya, something else. It wore a face, it used a voice, but its eyes were empty, and it whispered Lena's name. Far away in a hospital room with no electricity, a mirror cracked. The lights flickered on, and somewhere deep below the surface of reality, the lightless ones were free, or so they thought, because at the center of the void, a figure still stood. Leah, transformed, no longer human, not quite divine, a sentinel made of light and shadow, forged in guilt and sacrifice. She didn't just guard the door now, she was the door. And the war between fear and reflection had only just begun. The day Lena disappeared, no one noticed. At least, no one who mattered in the world of the living. But they noticed, the ones who had been waiting in the fractures between reflections, the ones who were never supposed to get out, the lightless ones. And now they were free. It started small. A blackout in 3 cities that lasted less than a minute. Yet in those 58 seconds, thousands reported missing time. Some woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. Others found words carved into their mirrors, into their skin. The threshold is open. Her eyes are ours now. Meanwhile, Leah was fighting to hold on. She hadn't left the sanctum when it shattered. But she felt the collapse, felt the veil tear, felt the void begin to bleed into the waking world. But she hadn't lost everything. She still had her flashlight, and her memories, and the voice that now echoed within her. It was Lena, or something left of her. Somehow, in trying to save Leah, Lena had sacrificed herself, and been woven into the sanctum, becoming a spectral guide through the crumbling edges of both worlds. Together, they had one goal: close the threshold before the lightless ones consumed the living. But time was different now. Leah couldn't walk through the streets like before. She traveled through reflections, shifting between puddles, windows, broken phone screens. Each passage brought her closer to reality, and closer to them. The lightless ones had no form unless you looked at them. Then they became your worst memory, your greatest regret. Your face, if it had never known love. They didn't kill outright, they erased. Every town they passed through lost someone, and no one remembered them. Not their names, not their photos, not even the places they once stood. Just, Leah found her first tether in a small town in Maine. A girl named Josie, age 10, blind since birth, who could hear whispers in mirrors. Josie had drawn symbols in crayon, symbols Leah recognized from the mirrorsmith's sanctum. "The woman in the flashlight told me to keep drawing," Josie said. "She said it would slow the shadows down." Lena. Leah stayed with Josie for 3 nights, protecting her from the lightless ones that stalked just beyond the windows. Each night, the reflections fought harder. Her flashlight dimmed faster. Her limbs grew heavier. But Josie had something new, a shard of mirror with an unbroken reflection, one untouched by the shadows, a pure tether. It was a map. It pointed to the origin, an ancient building, sealed beneath what once was a church, older than the mirrorsmith, older than Maya's sanctuary, even older than the legend of nyctophobia, a prism well, the source of all reflected nightmares, a place where the veil between light and dark was thinnest. The lightless ones were gathering there, and Leah would need to go in, one final time, and burn it from the inside. But this time, she wouldn't go alone. Josie insisted on coming, and with her came more. Others who had seen the signs, survivors of mirror hauntings, people marked by darkness. A small resistance formed, armed with broken flashlights, shattered glass, and hope. The road to the prism well was long and fractured. They moved by night, avoiding mirrors, covering reflective surfaces with ash. But the lightless ones knew. They whispered from shadows. They mimicked lost voices. They offered lies dressed as truth. Some followers vanished. Some turned. By the time they reached the gate, only 5 remained, including Josie and Leah and the mirrorsmith, reformed in reflection, now merely a hollow guide made of light scars and memory. "You won't survive this," he said. Leah looked at her flashlight. Its glow was almost gone. "I don't need to survive," she said. "I just need to close the door." They descended into the well, a spiral of glass burning with unlight. The lightless ones swarmed around them, shifting shapes, screaming truths. One tried to look like Lena. Another looked like Leah's mother. One wore Josie's face and begged for mercy. But they were no longer just phantoms. They had substance now. Form. Teeth. Leah screamed and cast her flashlight into the prism, shattering the source. The lightless ones howled in agony. The mirror walls collapsed inward. Reality twisted, and in that moment, Leah grabbed Josie's hand and told her to run. As the sanctum consumed itself, Josie fled, led by the echo of Lena's voice. She emerged in the real world again, dazed, coughing, sobbing, alone. No sign of Leah, no more whispers, no more shadows, just silence. For now, months passed, But not Josie. She kept one mirror shard under her pillow, and sometimes, when the moon hit it just right, she saw a woman with a flashlight standing in the dark, watching, waiting, protecting, because fear never dies, it just reflects. And somewhere in the endless maze of broken glass, the lightless ones still remember her name. End.